All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. A lot to do today. Baruch Hashem, a packed day. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph. This is Selma Wolf, dedicating all the Shemir Drashos this month with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem and the merit of refuah Shlema for all of those in need, in the schus of our brave soldiers, and the merit of Hashem, the schus of the return of our hostages. The Schwartzbaum family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef ben Meir Zichron Livracha, the Ziv, Levine, and Berman families, in memory of Bill Ziv, Zev Shmuel ben Yisrael. Our week of learning sponsors, Steve Golaskov, in honor of the bris of his grandson, Nachum David ben Eliyahu Baruch Halevi, incredible Mazel Tov, and may his parents in Meretz Hashem Bizucha to be machnisim l'Torah u'lechopa u'lemaisim tovim. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, the Pomerantz grandchildren. This might be a first. The Pomerantz grandchildren in honor of Zaidi Joel's birthday, and peace for all of Klal Yisrael. I don't know that we ever had grandchildren sponsor a Daf Yomi shir in honor of a grandfather's birthday. That is truly beautiful. Robert Emus, in memory of his younger brother, David Emus, David Chaim ben Yaakov Zichron Livracha, and Aaron Raskis, another Mazel of Aaron Raskis, with gratitude to Hashem for the healthy birth of a granddaughter born to Michal and Jacob Sachs. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. This little girl should grow up to be an incredible Bas Yisrael, a powerful Bas Yisrael, and a Meretz Hashem, a source of nachas for her parents, for her grandparents, and for all of Klal Yisrael. But with that, let us begin. Okay, it goes without saying, we have a lot to do today. Baruch Hashem, a lot to do today, but we'll get there. We will get there. All right, I don't know why this isn't working, but okay. Okay, let's get started. So we are picking up in Meretz Hashem. Today's daf is Kuf Yud Ches 118. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, literally the top 117b, the top line. Probably actually technically 117a, the last line, but I can't admit to that. So remember again, what we are focusing. We left off on the dramatic cliffhanger story. I'm sorry, I just don't know why this isn't. I feel like I'm getting too old for this. All right. Okay, it is what it is. All right, so we'll say, so we left off with the dramatic story of Rabbi Yochanan Rav Kahana. So if you remember again, Rav Kahana had left from Bava to Eretz Yisrael, and he had went to study by Rabbi Yochanan. So to make the long story short, Rabbi Yochanan thought that he was mocking him, that he was smirking at him, ultimately was embarrassed, was humiliated, and Rav Kahana died. So the Gemara points out over here, that's where we're picking up over here, thank you. So the Gemara picks up over here, the Gemara says, Rav Kahana went ahead and Rabbi Yochanan went to the grave of Rav Kahana. So Al-Gabi Ma'arta. So ultimately, again, he went to the burial cave. So the Gemara says, Hadrale Achna. So what happened? There was a serpent sitting at the entranceway of the cave. Amarle Achna Achna. So I'll say, so now this is Rav Kahana's grave, and there is a serpent sitting by the grave. Amarle Achna Achna. Pasach Pumach. The Kanis Harav Eitzel HaTalmid. So what happened? So Rav Kahana goes ahead and Rabbi Yochanan says, serpent, open your mouth, and let the Rebbe come into the Talmud. So in other words, so Rav Yochanan is asking for entry into the burial cave of Rabbi Yochanan. V'lo pasach, the serpent would not open his mouth. Rashi points out over here that the image is, it was a very large serpent that was coiled by the entrance. So it's almost as if that its tail was inside of its mouth. So therefore, again, it was coiled up and wouldn't allow. So that's why he says, Pasach Pumach, open up your mouth. But the snake wouldn't let him in. So finally, then Rabbi Yochanan says, okay, let a friend enter in before a friend. V'lo pasach, and ultimately, again, it would not go ahead and open its mouth. Yikanis Talmid Eitzel Harav, when finally Rabbi Yochanan said, serpent, open your mouth, and allow the Talmud, allow me, Rabbi Yochanan the Talmud, to go into the Rebbe, then at that point the serpent opened its mouth and allowed Rabbi Yochanan entry. So Rabbi say, what's unfolding over here? What's unfolding over here is the serpent, so to speak, is giving Musar to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan thought that he was the Rebbe, Rav Kahana was the Talmud. Then he thought, okay, maybe we're peers. But as it turns out, in fact, Rabbi Yochanan was the Talmud and Rav Kahana was the Rebbe. An incredible and overwhelming thing. So he goes in. So Rabbi says, so listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan davened and brought Rav Kahana back to life. Amrlei, and essentially, again, Rabbi Yochanan apologizes. He says, Rav Kahana, had I known that your lip was split, and that's why, again, you give off that appearance of the smirk, then in that case, again, I would have never gotten upset. In other words, obviously, I would have never been embarrassed, never been humiliated, had I realized that, again, that's just the way that you present. So listen to this, Rabbi say. So now it comes along. So now Rabbi Yochanan says, Rav Kahana, come back with me to the base medrash. All right, I brought you back to life. Come back with me to the base medrash. Amrlei, imatzis lemi bay rachamei desulo shechivna azilna. So we'll say there's a lot of machlokas as to exactly what these words mean. So Rashi has two interpretations. We'll go with the second interpretation of Rashi, which is Rav Kahana says to Rabbi Yochanan like this: I'll come back, right? I'll come back only if you promise me that I'm not going to die again. Now, there are two interpretations over here. Interpretation of, I'll tell you both. First Rashi says that what Rav Kahana was saying was like this. I might ask other questions that you might not know the answer to, and I just want to make sure we kind of have this worked out between us, right? In other words, that you're not going to get so upset that you send me back to the grave. Possibility number two, which is the Pashup shot, which is what we'll go with, is that Rav Kahana was saying to Rabbi Yochanan that I don't want to experience death again. So if you're going to bring me back to life and I'm going to live forever, right, or whatever, at least for a much longer time, I'll come back. V'i lo azilna. But if not, I'm not coming back with you. Hoil v'chalif shait v'chalif. Since I already experienced death, I already experienced death. In other words, both say, whatever the distress that is associated with experiencing death, Rav Kahana said, I experienced it already, so I don't want to go through that again. Olam Haba is fantastic, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. So if you could guarantee me that I'm going to remain in the world of the living, I'll come. But if not, I'm not going to come. It's incredible what I'll say. So Gemara says, Taire, Okme, Shaile. So I'll say what happened. So apparently, here's what we know. We just know from this Gemara, Rav Kahana was alive after this episode. So clearly the Gemara says, he brought him back to life. Okmei, brought him back to the base medrash. Shaili kol sveika dahavile upashtinu kulu. So ultimately, again, and Rav Yochanan asked Rav Kahana every single kasha that he had, every safek, and Rav Kahana was able to answer it. Hainu dam Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi say this is why Rabbi Yochanan used to say Dilchon Amri Dilhon Hi. Rabbi Yochanan essentially the expression was Rabbi Yochanan said, I used to think that the Jews of Eretz Yisrael had mastery over Torah. Now I realize that it's the Jews of Bavel who have mastery over Torah. So of course, going to both say this was a reference to Rav Kahana. So I'll say dramatic and overwhelming story. Of course, I will say a profound and beautiful and meaningful Musar Haskell is in how this whole thing unfolded. Why? Because ultimately, again, Rabbi Yochanan misunderstood something that he saw. In other words, he thought he saw one thing, but it turns out that he really saw something incredibly and dramatically different. I will say a tremendous Musar Haskell, how often we rush to judgments, and how often we go ahead and condemn people, and how often we go ahead and we size up circumstances based on things that we see quickly, but in fact, very often we're wrong. I will say, now the follow-up Musar Haskell is, and sometimes as a result of the rush judgments we make, realities occur, and often those realities can't be undone. See, Rabbi said the beautiful part about this story is Rabbi Yochanan had the convenient ability to bring back the dead, right? Good for him, right? That was great. Baruch Hashem, good for him. But let's say a lot of times in life, we do things, we cause destruction, but we don't have the ability to bring back the dead. So a lot of times, again, as a result of our rush judgment, things happen that we cannot control. Thank you. Things happen that we cannot control, that at the end of the day, we are stuck with the consequences. Wait before you pass judgment. Wait before you react. Count to 10 before you, or at least 5, before you take dramatic action based on what you see. Because sometimes, once you do something for us, there's no going back. Incredible Gemara. Hahu, da'achles. Well, so back to some regular cases. Okay, let's go weiter. Ahu, da'achve sorry, I'm takasa Rabbi Avo. So we'll say, remember again, back to our sugya. What's our sugya? Our sugya is matzil asal chavero. What is the liability if you go ahead and you save yourself by giving away someone else's money? That's our Mishnah that we started yesterday. That's back to our sugya. All right, so we'll say, it says as follows. There was a guy who showed the amtukasa of Rabbi Abba. Sorry, we'll say, what's an amtukasa? So Rashi says over here, tachshite meshi, a silk garment. So Rabbi Abba had a silk garment, and this guy, just call him Reuven, this guy went ahead and showed the garment to the basikin, to the extortionists or to the tax collectors, whatever it was. Yasar Rabbi Avar Chanina bar Pavi, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Yasar Rabbi Elai Gavayo, Savar L'chuyuvein. So all these Rabbanim were sitting together and said, the guy should be chayiv. Why should the guy be chayiv? Based on the following from the following Mishnah. This nan. Donas hadin zika sachayiv v'chivas hazakai. So let's say a judge was adjudicating a case, and let's say he judged wrongly, right? He ruled the innocent person was guilty, the guilty person was innocent. Timei satar v'tir asatime, or he ruled something that was tamei tar or tar tamei. What's the halacha? Masha asa asui. So we'll say in general we have a principle that whenever a Beis Din paskins halacha, it stands. However, the shalimi beso. But I will say if a judge knows that he judged erroneously, there's an obligation for him to make the parties whole from his own pocket. So the judgment stands, but the judge has to go ahead and repay the adversely impacted party. Now, what does that have to do? What does that have to do with anything? You see from here that there is financial liability for your words. So the same way the judge pronounced a verdict that was wrong, thereby causing someone a financial loss, he has to pay. So too, they wanted to suggest that when this guy showed the tax collectors or the extortioners, whoever he showed the silk garment of Rabbi Abba, right, just words, there should be financial liability for that as well. Amar Rabbi Haki Amrav, V'hu shenasan v'nasan biyad. So says exactly yesterday's that Rabbi Lai qualified this. And Rabbi said it's true, there's liability. One is a liability only when the guy actively hands the object to the collectors, the extortionists. In other words, words by themselves are not enough. There has to be a maisa in order for there to be financial liability. Amrila, Zila Gabi Rabbi Shem ben Yokim. Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas, the Daine Dina Degarmi. So I'll say, so the truth is, really should take this case. Rabbi Shimon el Yakin, Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas. They will say they deal with cases of Garmi. Now remember, for our purposes, Garmi is just going to mean the same thing as Grama, causation. Azal Gabayu. Ultimately, again, they went to these Rabbanim. Chayvim mimas nisin. They went ahead and they made this guy liable. I will say, same case. The guy who showed the silk of Rabbi Abba, they made him chayiv based on our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? Imachmas hagazlan chayiv lahamid lo sadeh acher v'okimna da'achvi achvuye. So we'll say, so remember again, what was the case in our Mishnah? How do we set it up? The case in our Mishnah was, when is there liability? When the person actively shows the masikin where the property is. So I will say, so remember again, if, right, there's Reuven just minding his own business, watching someone else's property, the masikin come along and take it, Reuven's not chayiv in that kind of case. But Reuven actively shows the collectors or the extortionists, whoever it is, where the property is, that's when there is liability. So interestingly enough, from our perspective, you don't have to actively give it over. You just have to actively disclose the whereabouts, and that creates financial liability. Okay, let's go back there. More cases. Hu gavra to have a mafkid le casa de kaspa saliku gan ve'iluye. So we'll see what happens. It was a guy. We'll call him Reuven. Right? Reuven was watching a silver utensil for Shimon. What happens? So thieves came along, took the silver utensil. Shakla, so the Gemara says, gan ve'iluye. Thieves came to Reuven. What did Reuven do? Shakla yavalahu. Reuven took the silver utensil that he was watching for Shimon, and he gave it to the thieves. So the case came before Rabbah, Patre, and ultimately again Rabbah exempted him. Rabbah exempted Shimon the Shomer. Sorry, Reuven the Shomer. But one second, we'll say, isn't this a classic case of saving yourself with your friend's money, where we've learned that what? There is liability, especially if at the end of the day, you're actively giving, right? Reuven's actively giving the silver utensil to the thieves. Ravash says like this, Chazinon, we look at the following. I inish amitu, adaita didei asu. So I will say, if at the end of the day, Reuven was a wealthy guy, and therefore this was a targeted theft. It was a targeted theft, and then Reuven goes ahead and gives Shimon's silver utensil, then that's called matzil atzma maman chaveru, saving yourself with your friend's money, and Reuven would be liable. V'ilo, but if this was just a random theft, then adaita de kaspa asu. Then we assume that the reason why the thieves came is not because of Reuven. Rather, why did they come? Because they heard that Reuven had a silver utensil. In other words, we'll say essentially what we look at is it the object that was targeted or the person that was targeted? If it was the person that was targeted, then Reuven's going to be liable because he saved himself with Shimon's money. If, however, it was the object that was targeted, then Reuven will not be liable because they were coming for the object anyway. All right, incredible. Hugavra, Dava Mafkid Gabe Arnika de Pinoshur. Both said this is an incredible case. There was a guy, we'll call him Reuven, right? And Reuven was holding on to a bag of money for redemption of captives. Pidyon Shvuyim. What happened? Saliku Ganveiluye, Shakla Yavanehilu. Thieves came to Reuven, and Reuven gave them the money, the Pidyon Shvuyim money. So the case came before Rabbah. Patre, Rabbah said he's pater. Amalei Abaye is pater. But one second, Reuven just saved himself with someone else's money. To which Rabbah responded, Amalei ein Pidyon Shvuyim gadol mizeh. We'll say first wide line. Right, so what are you talking about? The money was for Pidyon Shvuyim, redemption of captives. What greater redemption of captives is there than a guy being held up by a group of robbers? So therefore, again, he actually felt there's no misappropriation of the money. This was appropriate use. Incredible. So this is a really interesting case. There was a guy who brought his donkey on a boat. Okay? So we'll say, so this Mivra case, this is really like a barge that people would use to get from one side of the river to the other side of the river. So we'll say, so in general, you don't bring livestock on a barge. At least not a people barge, right? You take a livestock barge. So there was this guy, though, again, sometimes people could be a little bit inconsiderate with their animals, as perhaps we've mentioned over the course of our journeys through Shas. So I'll say, so this guy brings his donkey onto the barge. He brings his donkey onto the barge. So what happened? So the Gemara says, Kamei de Salki in Mivra. Now, he was smart. What did he do? He got his donkey on the barge before people got on the barge. Okay, second wide line. So, what was the problem? The barge then sets out. The problem now is that the barge was about to sink as a result of the donkey. It wasn't made for animals. So what happened? Also Gavra, Malach le'lechamra dahu Gavra, v'shaji nara v'tava. Guy comes along, so we'll call it, so Reuven's guy with the donkey. Shimon comes along, what does Shimon do? He pushes the donkey off the barge. Donkey can't swim, donkey drowns. So they brought the case before Patre, and Rabbah says, Shimon the pusher is pater. Shimon the pusher is pater. But one second, Shimon is saving himself with his friend's money, right? In other words, he's pushing the donkey off the barge. He's saving himself by causing someone else a loss. Amarle, listen to this. Hai meikara rodefu. So we'll say he said the donkey from the beginning. Really, it's not the donkey. Rashi says, Bala Chomer, rodefu, la'arog nefashos. So what's in reality? Rabbah said that this guy, the owner of the donkey, is a rodef. He's a rodef. He's putting everyone else in mortal danger, and as such again, the Shimon has every right to push the donkey off the barge, and therefore there's no liability. And I watch this. It's actually very interesting. Rabbah l'tamei. Rabbah goes according to his reasoning. Da'amar Rabbah rodef shahaya rodef achar chaver lahargo v'shiber esakelim. So this is an interesting case. Reuven is running after Shimon to kill him. Right, Reuven wants to kill Shimon, so Reuven is a rodef. On the way, so as Reuven's running after Shimon, v'shiber esakelim, and Reuven breaks utensils as he's running after Shimon to kill him. Bein shal nirdaf, bein shal kol adam pater shar mischai benafsho. So Rabbi say this is an interesting application of kimlei b'draba minei. Rabbi say it's the second time that we've had this type of application. When Reuven is running after Shimon to kill him, Reuven is called a rodef. Rabbi say, what is the halacha with a rodef? What is the halacha? You're allowed to kill a rodef, which essentially means that while Reuven is running after Shimon to kill him, Reuven has a chi of misa, right? Essentially like a death penalty hanging over him. Therefore, any financial damage that he causes while pursuing Shimon to kill him, he's pater for. Right? Why? Because since essentially he has a capital judgment against him, he's exempt from any type of financial liability. Very interesting. Pater. So what happens? What happens if Shimon, right? Shimon's running away from Reuven. In the course of running away, Shimon ends up breaking utensils. If it's the utensils of Reuven, the pursuer, then ultimately again, Shimon is going to be pater. Aval shall call Adam Chayiv. Wow, Bava says it's quite fascinating. But if Shimon, while running away from Reuven, ends up breaking other people's utensils, there is financial liability for that. Why? The Asr lahatzil asmo b'mamon chavero. Wow. Because you can't save yourself by damaging someone else's property. I just want to point out, in this case, what does this mean? Can you imagine this? Shimon's running away from Reuven, right? And what happens? Shimon sees that my earthenware jug is right here. So Shimon has a great idea. He wants to pick it up, throw it at Reuven, and at least slow the guy down. So tell me now, Shimon's not allowed to do that? Shimon's not allowed to take my jug and we'll say he could do it. But what? There's liability for that. So that's what it means. Obviously, he is allowed to go ahead and take my jug and throw it at Reuven to slow him down to possibly save his life, but there is financial liability for that. Now, watch this. Which also tells you something so incredibly amazing. Even when running away to save your life, you must be cognizant of other people. Is that not? Let's say you want to talk about the heightened threshold that we have towards bein adam lechavero, right? Reuven's running away Shimon's running away for his life. He's running from Reuven, right? So now what does he want to do? He wants to pick up other people's property, throw it at Reuven in order to slow Reuven down. You could do it, but you're going to be financially liable. That is the level of achrayus, the level of responsibility we have one towards the other. So it's incredible. Last case is great. V'rodef shaya rodef acha rodef lahatzil. So we'll say, watch this. Rodef acha rodef. This is fantastic. Reuven's running after Shimon to kill him. Levi sees this. So what does Levi do? Levi begins to run after Reuven to kill Reuven, to stop him from trying to kill Shimon. All right, well, what's the halacha? We'll say, V'shibra kelim. We'll say, now let's say Levi, while running after Reuven, breaks utensils. V'shibra kelim. Bein shal nirdaf, bein shal kol adam. Whether he breaks the utensils of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yisachar, whoever's pater. We'll say he's pater. Now, why is this? This is incredible. V'lo min adin. Now, Rabbi say this is not really based on halacha, because based on halacha, you really should be liable when you break someone else's utensils, even if you're doing it for a good reason. So, why do we exempt Levi in this case? She'im iyata omer kain. See, Rabbi say this is incredible. We see this in other places also. We see this in other circumstances that sometimes Chazal have to exempt you from liability, because if you don't, you're not going to undertake the responsibility. So if you're Levi's like, listen, I'm going to try to save Shimon, right? Reuven's running after Shimon. I'm going to try to save Shimon. But the truth is, if I have to worry about financial liability while putting my own life at danger in order to go ahead and save Shimon, guess what? I'm out. I'm not doing it. So what does the halacha do? In order to encourage Levi to step up and Levi to help Shimon out of this precarious situation, the halacha says, don't worry, do what you have to do, and you are pater. So I will say, so bottom line, how do we? Okay, we got to move on. We have a lot of ground to cover still. We're perfect. I will say, but lamaisa, what do we do in this case of matzil atzmo b'mamon chavero? So first I will say, in general, the Rambam paskins that if Reuven steals the fields from Shimon, and then let's say the masikin or the tax collectors go ahead and come along and seize the property from Reuven. So what's Reuven's liability? So the Rambam makes the same distinction of the Mishnah. If the Masikin are stealing from everyone, not what we call Makas Medina, from everyone, then ultimately Reuven the thief is not liable, because we assume the same thing would have happened had he not stolen the property from Shimon. However, if they're only collecting from Reuven because it's Reuven, then halacha l'maisa Reuven is obligated to go ahead and furnish Shimon with a brand new field. However, if the Masikin show up to Reuven and they say to Reuven, show us what you got. And Reuven goes out of his way to show them the field of Shimon. Achvile, he shows them the field of Shimon, then there is liability. So again, the Rambam paskins with the interpretation of the Mishnah as we had in our Gemara, that halacha l'maisa, if Reuven shows the collectors the property, achvile, he shows them the property, then halacha l'maisa, then Reuven is chayiv to go ahead and give Shimon a brand new field. Okay, incredible. I'll say let's go weiter. Says the Mishnah, another case. Sorry. Shatfa nar. Supposed to say, watch this. Same case of theft. Reuven stole a field from Shimon. After he stole it, the river overruns the field. So now the field is destroyed. So what's the halacha? Omer lo harisha chalafanecha. So Reuven could do a shavas, right? Reuven could go in and give him back the field, so to speak. Now remember, real estate in general is different. Why? Because karka in an exelis, right? You can't steal real property. So real property, in essence, always remains within the purview of the owner. So in this case over here, Reuven stole a field from Shimon, then the field was overrun by the river, right? So essentially Reuven could say to Shimon, I'm giving it back to you. It's your field, it never really left your possession, here it is. Okay, says if Reuven steals a field from Shimon and the river overran it, so Reuven has to go ahead and furnish Shimon with a new field. Divrei Rabbi Elazar. That's statement of Rabbi Elazar. Chacham say, Chachamim Omer lo, Harisha Chalafanecha. Chacham say, no, just give him back the field as is. So what's the argument? Rabbi Elazar Dashi Ribui Umeute. So we're going to see actually the Machlokes, Rabbi Elazar and the Chachamim is an exegetical Machlokes. Quite interesting. So Rabbi Elazar darshins a riboy and a miut. The kichesh ba'amito. So we'll say the kichesh means a person denies liability that he stole. Riboy. That's a riboy. But pikadon, then it's a pikadon, a deposit. Mi'et. Kala shayishba alav l'shaker. Anything you swear about falsely. Chazav a riba. So what do you have? Riba umiet v'riba. So you have a riboy, a miut, and a riboy. So what's the halacha? Riba hakol. It includes everything. Umay Rabbi. What does it come to include? Rabbi kol mili comes to include in the laws of theft all items. Umay miet. What does it come to exclude? Miet shtaris. Comes to exclude documents, because I will say documents do not have an inherent value. For Rabbanan darshi klalu prati, they darshin klalu prat, the kichesh klal bipikadon prat. Omikol chazar vekalal. So klal upratu klal. So what's the word? They have a klal upratu klal. So iatadan elkeina prat. So the klal is defined by the prat. What's unique about the prat? Ma prat davar hamatal v'gufa mamon. So we'll say just like in this case, which is pikadon. Just like in this case, again, the prat is davar hamatal, saying that is movable and inherently valuable. Af kol davar hamatal v'gufa mamon. So it comes to include anything that is movable and inherently valuable. What does that come to exclude? Yatsu karko shematal. And it excludes land, real property, because real property is not movable. Yatsu avadim shukshul kakos. It excludes avadim because avadim are compared to kakos. And yatsu shtaros shafa b'shematatlin ein gufan mamon. And it comes to exclude ultimately again metaltalin because metaltalin. Comes to exclude shtaros, Even though shtaros are movable, they are not inherently valuable. So we'll say, so this is the position. Therefore, again, this machlokes manifests itself in a case of Reuven stealing land from Shimon. Now the land is ruined. The river overflows it. Rabbi Elazar, who darshins ribui umiut, is going to say that Reuven is chayiv to go ahead and furnish Shimon with a brand new field. And the Chacham who darshin, the klalu pratu klal, will say that you are not chayiv to give a new field. You just have to give back the ruined field. Okay, but we learned how goes us a part of a shatfanar chayiv lahamid lo para. Yeah, we learned about say that if Reuven steals a cow from Shimon and then the river washes away the cow, that you are Reuven is chayiv to give Shimon a new cow. Divrei Rabbi Elazar, the Chum say Omer lo harei shach alafanecha. The Chum say no. Here's your cow. Now again, where's the cow? We'll see in just a second. Someone says no. Hasag b'may kamiflagi. Amar Papa hasam b'may askinon. Kigon shegazel sada mechaver. No, I will say the case over there is where Reuven actually stole a field from Shimon. Stole the fields from Shimon. V'haisa kufyud chesed medalef 118a. V'haisa para revutza bo. So we'll say, watch this. So Reuven stole the fields from Shimon, and there was a cow on the field. V'shat fanar, and then the river washed away the field. So we'll say, actually, so it's not a case of a washed away cow. It's actually a case of a washed away field that happened to have a cow on top of it. On top of it. So I will say, so the shaila is over here, according to Belazar, who says that you could steal real property. So just as you could steal real property, so again, you acquired the cow by dint of the property, and therefore just like you're liable for the property, you're liable for the cow. According to the Chum, who say karka in an exelis, real property cannot be stolen, the same way that you never really acquire the field, you also never really acquire the cow. Therefore, just as there's no liability for the field, there's no liability for the cow. But say, halacha l'maaseh, how do we paskin? Rabban paskins that we always paskin karka in an exelis. You can't steal real property, which essentially means that even when you quote unquote steal a field, that field remains within the property of the owner. So Rabbi said, therefore, in this case, it's actually quite fascinating. Reuven steals a field from Shimon, field gets totally ruined, right? River overruns the field, destroys the field. Shimon now wants to be a Baal Tshuva. It's interesting how that works, right? Now that the field has no value, Shimon wants to be a Baal Tshuva. Tshuva will take it as we can get it. So what's the halacha? Shimon goes back to Reuven, albeit a bit meekly, and says, Harei shachal lefanecha, I'm returning your field, and that's it. And that's it. Reuven has no additional liability because karka ain't an exelis. Now I will say, the only difference with these kind of cases would be, is like if there was produce, now the produce is gone. We spoke about those other cases earlier, but in a general sense, if the field is destroyed, all Reuven has to do is return the field as is, and he's done. Good. Mishnah. Hagoza as chavero o shel v'haimenu o shehifkid lo b'yishuv lo yachzir lo b'midbar. Fascinating halacha over here. Fascinating halacha. Let's say Reuven goes ahead and steals from Shimon or borrows from Shimon, right? Or Shimon deposited something with Reuven. So let's say they entered into this transaction b'yishuv. B'yishuv means inhabitation in the city. Then what's the halacha? Lo yachzir lo b'midbar. You can't return the object in the midbar. Now both say, what's the difference between the yishuv and the midbar? Yishuv is considered to be, city is considered to be a bit more safe. Midbar is unsafe. So essentially, if I owe something to someone and the transaction occurred in habitation, I can't return the object, whether it's theft, loan, or deposit in the wilderness. Let's say it's midbar, yachzol midbar. However, again, if it was on the condition to go into the desert, then you could return to the desert. We'll see exactly what that statement means. Good. Let's go right there. Says the Gemara. Good. Now both say, fine. Or minu, malva mishtalemesh bechol makom. Yet also we learned that a loan could be repaid anywhere. So aveida upikadon imishtalem elbim koman. But an aveida and a pikadon, right? So a lost object or a deposit can only be returned in the place where the transaction occurred. Rabbi Hakar, that's what it means to say. Milva nitna litava bechol makom. So also here's the difference. If Reuven lent money to Shimon, right? Reuven could ask Shimon for that money wherever they are. In other words, we'll say if you lend someone money, the creditor has the right to ask for repayment wherever he wants. Right? Now, obviously, this is assuming that the loan is due. Right? He meets him at a chasana, he meets him at the desert, he meets him at the beach, wherever he is, he could say, give me back my money. And the borrower doesn't have a right to say, I don't want to pay you back over here. I only want to pay you back, in the city or in this place. Wherever the loan is claimed, that's where the borrower has to pay back. Rashi says over here, Nitna litava im yirtzeh malveh diyado al ha'alyona. The lender has the upper hand, and therefore wherever the lender demands repayment, that's where the borrower has to give repayment. So aveido pikadon lo nitna litava elabim koman. On the other hand, we'll say a lost object, returning a lost object, or a pikadon deposited object, those have more controlled return processes, and therefore you only return those objects in the place where their quote-unquote transaction occurred. Okay, Almanas, let's say it's Bamidbar. So Pshita, so obviously again, if we're talking about a case where let's say, I don't know, the object was deposited, right? Reuven deposited an object with Shimon, and he's giving this to on the condition that you give it back to me in the desert. Okay, so they made a condition. What's the chiddush over here? The Gemara says, no, lo tzricha de amar lehavi haipi kadon gabach de ana lemidbar nafkina. So let's listen to this. Here's the case. Reuven deposited an object with Shimon, and as he deposits it, he tells the Shimon, you know what? I'm depositing this with you because I'm going out to the desert. Out to the desert, I don't want to carry it with me. I'm going to leave it with you in the desert. So both say, so what happens? And Shimon says, Shimon, the shomer says, I'm also going out to the desert. So the halacha is, so I will say, essentially, what the Gemara is saying is like this: if at the end of the day, Reuven the depositor says to Shimon, I'm going ahead and depositing this with you because I'm going out to the desert. So both say, so that is ki'ilu, that's ki'ilu, that Reuven the depositor is saying that Shimon, if you happen to be in the desert as well, you could give this back to me in the desert. So look at Rashi just a moment. So both say, if Reuven deposits it with Shimon, and Reuven says, going out to the desert. And Shimon says, oh, you know what? I'm going to be going out to the desert as well. It's understood in that transaction that if Shimon wants to give it back to Reuven in the desert, he has the ability to do so, even though that was never explicitly articulated. Beautiful. Says the Mishnah. Ha'omer lechavero, gezalticha. Both says, great case. Ha'omer lechavero, gezalticha, hilvi sani, hifkarati etzli, ve'ini odem hichzarti lecha, im lo hichzarti lecha. So say, watch this case. Right? Reuven goes over to Shimon. Reuven says to Shimon, look, here's the deal. I stole from you, or I borrowed money from you, or you deposited an object with me. Right? But I can't remember if I gave it back. Right? So I can't remember if I paid back my debt. I can't remember if I repaid, if I gave you back the stolen object, or I can't remember if I gave you back the deposits. Okay. So the Gemara says, let's ta'alacha, chayiv l'shalim. Ultimately, Reuven, who's unsure, has to pay. Avalim Amarlo Eni Yodeh Im Gizaticha Im Helvi Sani Kiv Karati Etzli Pater Milishalim. But I will say, so case number one is where Reuven says, I know I stole from you. I had a deposit of yours, I borrowed money from you. What I don't know is, did I repay you? So if he doesn't know if he repaid him, he has to repay, possibly again. However, if Reuven says, listen, Shimon, I don't know, I may have stolen from you. You know, it was such a rough day, right? I don't know, right? I may have borrowed from you, I may have had a deposit of yours. So we'll say, in that case, Reuven doesn't have any liability to pay. All right, let's unpack this. So let's listen to this. Different kind of case. Right, Shimon comes over to Reuven. Shimon says, Reuven, you have my money. Right, whenever I lent you money, I deposited money with you. And Reuven says, you know what? I don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just happen not to know. What's the halacha? Rav Huna Rav Yehuda Amri Chayiv. Rav Huna Rav Yehuda say that Reuven is going to be Chayiv. Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yochanan Amri Pater. Rabbi Yochanan say that he's Pater. So let's unpack this. So Rav Huna Rav Yehuda Amri Chayiv. Why do they say Chayiv? Bari v'shem Bari Adif. Both say in halacha when you have two claims, one is a definitive claim and one is a possible claim. Who wins? The definitive claim. Now both say in this case over here, Shimon saying to Reuven, I lent you money and you didn't pay me back. Right? What is Reuven saying? I don't know. Okay, so Shimon's making a definitive claim. That's Bari, right? Shimon's making a possible claim. That's Shema. Bari v'Shema, Bari Adif. From Nachman Rabbi Yochanan Pater. Why? Uki mamona becheskas marei. No. Because at the end of the day, if you have a suffix mamon, you're not sure. Now, obviously, we're talking about a case over here where there's no eidos, right? There's no eidos, right? So ultimately, in this case, what do you have over here? Shimon saying to Reuven, you owe me money. Reuven saying, I just don't know. Uke mamone becheskas marei means, let's say you leave money where it is. Wherever money is, we assume that's the place where it's supposed to be. We leave money where it is, and unless you could furnish definitive proof that Reuven owes Shimon money, we leave things alone. Incredible. Tanan. Aval im amar lo ini yodea im hilvi sani pater. So we'll say, but look at the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah's case was, in the seifa of the Mishnah was, right, Reuven says, Reuven says, I don't know if I stole from you, I don't know if I borrowed from you, and I don't know if you deposited an object from me. So Rabbi say, what's talacha? Patami l'shalim. So Rabbi say that seems to go ultimately with the second school of thought and not with the first. So hey Ridami, what's the case? Ilema de katavale. So if we're talking about a case where Shimon is claiming that Reuven owes him these things, so Ilema de lo katavale, excuse me. If we're talking about a case where Shimon is not claiming anything against Reuven, then Reisha nami de lo katavale. Then the first part of the Mishnah must also be talking about a case where Shimon is not claiming anything. But if Shimon is not claiming anything, I both say, then I'm my chayiv. Then I don't understand. I both say, if Reuven is saying, I stole from you, but I never paid you back, right? You let me, but I never paid you back. And Shimon is saying, I don't know, I'm not claiming anything. Then I will say, why would there be a chiyuv of Reuven? Why would there be a chiyuv of Reuven to repay a debt if the supposed creditor Shimon is not saying there is a debt? Right? So Gemara says, "Amay chayiv elo de katavale." Rather, it has to be a case where ultimately Shimon is claiming money from Reuven. I vekatani seifa patami l'shalim. But yet the seifa is saying that Reuven doesn't have to pay. So what's going on over here? Lo li'olam de lo katavale. This is fast. This is riveting. We're talking about a case where the case of the Mishnah is where Shimon is not claiming anything from Reuven. So one second. Let's plug this into the Reisha. How does this work? Right? So Reuven is saying, Shimon, I borrowed money, I stole from you. You gave me a deposit, I never gave it back to you. And Shimon is like saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? I just don't know what you're talking about. So the Mishnah says that Reuven is chayiv to pay. And let's say, when are you ever chayiv to pay if there's not a claimant? Right? In other words, if there's no claim being made against you, then mehecha teisi that you're obligated to pay. V'reisha, here we go. Beva latzeis yedei shamayim. Right? Beva latzeis shamayim. Incredible, I will say. When the Mishnah says that Reuven is chayiv, it doesn't mean b'dinei adam. Rather, what does it mean? B'dinei shamayim. I'll say, if I know that I owe someone money, even if they're not claiming it, right? Even more than that, I will say, they're saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any recollection of this. In bidini adam, in a human court, if there is no claimant, then you are not obligated to pay. But bidini shamayim, if I know that I owe someone something, then at the end of the day I have an obligation to make good. Itmar nami, Amr B'chia Baraba, Amr B'yochanan, Amr L'chavero, Manali B'yadecha. Reuven says to Shimon, I owe you money. And Shimon says, I don't know. Chayiv biva latzeis yedei shamayim. You are obligated, I will say, to go ahead and fulfill your obligation towards the other. Not bidini adam, not in the eyes of a human court. In a human court, if no one's claiming you owe them something, then you owe absolutely nothing. But if you know that you owe someone something, even if they're not claiming anything against you, you have a chiyuv to pay them back, alt dini shamayim, in order to go ahead and satisfy your obligation vis-a-vis HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Incredible. Mishnah. Hagon if Tlamina Eiderech Zero Omeis Onignov Chai Bachriuso. Jose's case is getting better. It's incredible. Watch this. Reuven steals a sheep from Shimon's flock. Okay. Now watch this. Vich Zero. Now Reuven returns it. He steals it and he returns it. After he returns it, Umeis Onignov. Listen to this. After Reuven returns the stolen sheep to Shimon, the same sheep is once again either dies or is stolen. What's talacha? Chayiv ba'achri yuso. So Reuven Rabbi say the thief is still liable. Now what's the logic over here? So Rabbi say, if you take a quick look at Rashi, Chayiv ba'achri yuso, Rashi says, D'mechi ganva kimle birshusei, v'ashava da'avid lav hashavahu ad shemoda lehu lebailim. Rabbi say, when you steal something, we're going to see, this is our discussion now, when you steal something, you have an obligation to return it. The object is only considered to be returned when the owner knows of its return. So therefore, in this case over here, Reuven stole the sheep from Shimon, and then he surreptitiously put it back in the flock. The same sheep is subsequently dies or is stolen. Reuven is still chayiv. Why is Reuven chayiv? Because that sheep is considered to be in Reuven's domain until Shimon is aware of its return. Only once Shimon is aware of its return does the sheep then become Shimon's again, and now Shimon has full responsibility. Incredible. Lo yadu bailim. We'll say, watch this. What happens if Reuven stole the sheep from Shimon, and Shimon never knew about it? Lo b'gneva chaziraso. Shimon was unaware of it both at the time that it was stolen, as well as at the time of its return. So umano asatzon. Watch this. And we'll say, all we know is that Shimon went out the next morning. So we'll say, imagine the following, right? It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Reuven stole a sheep, right? And then again, he came to Daf Yomi, had a change of heart, returns the sheep, right? Shimon has no idea. Shimon just gets up the next morning, Thursday morning, he counts the flock, and Baruch Hashem, same number. So Shimon is totally oblivious and unaware to what's occurred. To which the Gemara says, what's the halacha? So pater. Then I will say, so then even if something subsequently occurs to the sheep, Reuven is pater. So what the Mishnah seems to be saying is, if the victim was never aware of what happened, right? He never knew about the theft and never knew about the return, halacha l'maisa, Reuven is pater in totality. Okay, in other words, when we say pater, something happened to the sheep, Reuven is pater. Beautiful. Amarav, so we'll say, here we go. Ladas, if the theft happens with the knowledge of the owner, then tzarech das, then the return of the object has to happen with the knowledge of the owner as well. Shelo ladas, what happens about say if halacha l'maisa the object was stolen without the knowledge of the owner, then minyan poter. Then about say when the owner counts the flock and the flock is intact, the thief is exempt from all liability. And therefore I will say ultimately again when it says that when he went ahead and he counted the sheep and the flock was intact, that referred to the second case of the Mishnah where the owner was unaware that the theft had ever taken effect. So we'll say, here we go. That's Rav's position. Shmuel says, Bein ladas ben shelo ladas minyan poter. Shmuel says, whether the theft occurred with the knowledge of the owner or not with the knowledge of the owner, once the owner counts the flock and the flock is intact, so the thief is freed from all liability. Because once the owner sees that everything is there, the owner has full responsibility for the flock. V'chikatani umano v'hi shlema. And when the Mishnah said he counted the flock and it's intact, pater, that the thief will be pater, akula goes on the entire Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Ledas minyan poter, shalo ledas afilu minyan nami lo tzarech. So Rabbi Yochanan says like this: when the theft was committed with the knowledge of the owner, so once the owner counts the flock and it's fully intact, the thief is exempt from all liability. Shalo ledas. However, if the theft occurred without the knowledge of the owner, so I'll say, if you did it without the knowledge of the owner is totally oblivious, the thief has no liability once he went ahead and returned it back to the flock, even if the owner didn't count the flock. And when the Mishnah said he counted the sheep, and the flock is intact, aresha. That's going on the first case of Mishnah. Rav Chisda says, we'll say here it is, ladas, and both said this is going to be the halacha. My opinion, Rav Chisda says, ladas minyan poter. I will say, if Reuven steals from Shimon and Shimon is aware of the theft, when Shimon subsequently counts his flock and the full flock is there, a proper return of stolen property has occurred. We're good. Shalo ledas, however, again, let's say Reuven stole the object without the knowledge of Shimon. Tzarich das. Shimon has to know about the return of the object in order to go ahead and for the hashava to be complete. And when the Mishnah said that Shimon counted the flock and was fully intact, aresha. Ultimately, it goes on aresha. So we'll say, let's hyper-focus on this last opinion of Chisda. So Chisda says like this: if Reuven steals from Shimon, and Shimon knows that he's been the victim of a theft, well, let's say Wednesday, and then Thursday morning, Shimon counts the flock, and Baruch Hashem, what does he count? All the animals are back. So what does Shimon know? What happened? Stolen object has been returned. Done. Hashava been accomplished. However, if Reuven stole from Shimon and Shimon was unaware of the theft, in order for Reuven to do a proper hashava, a proper return, what the halacha is teaching us is, proper return is not just returning a lost object. Proper return is the knowledge, the owner has the knowledge that he is whole. Even though Shimon never knew that he was stolen from, nevertheless, proper hashava requires that Reuven go over to Shimon and say, Shimon, I'm sorry, I stole your sheep. Ultimately, now I'm giving you back your sheep. Here's my tshuva and shalom Yisrael. Incredible. Amar Rava. So Rava says, I'll say on my base. There was no need for that, right? Right? Okay. So Gemara says as follows. So Gemara says like this. So Amar Rava. Rava says, my time is Rav Chisda. What's Rav Chisda's logic? Hoil v'inkata nagri braysa. So let's listen to this. What's his logic? So we'll say this is fascinating. Let's talk about this in just a second. I understand the first case, right? I understand if Ruvain steals. Watch this. If Ruvain steals shalol das, right? Ruvain goes ahead and steals from. Oh, sorry, take that back. Ruvain steals from Shimon, and Shimon is aware of the theft. Then the next morning, Shimon counts the flock. The flock is intact. So now, what does Shimon know? Shimon knows that the stolen object has been returned. Shalom Yisrael. I don't understand the second case, right? Reuven steals from Shimon, and Shimon has no idea. So, right? So what happens? We'll say Reuven. So Shimon counts his flock every single morning. After morning flock call. So what happens? Right? Reuven sneaks in there, steals the sheep. The same day, Shimon returns the sheep. So now comes Thursday morning, right? Comes Thursday morning, Shimon counts the flock again, and the flock is intact. So as far as Shimon knows, I will say, what's happened? Nothing's happened. So why is there a need? But yet Rav Chisda said, no, Ruvain, you need to go over to Shimon, tell him that you stole the sheep and that you returned the sheep. Why? So Rabbi say this is fascinating. Why is that? The Gemara says, my time, hoil va'ankita nagri baraisa. So Rabbi say, here's what we're concerned about. Once a sheep has been stolen, right? And it's experienced life outside of the flock, right? It lived independently a little bit, bachelor sheep life, right? For a little bit, right? It's been on its own. It just experienced life out of the pen, right? So I both say that level of independence makes the sheep a wanderer. So I will say, so therefore, again, if you're a shepherd, you have that flock, you need to keep a little bit of an eye on that sheep because now it's used to wandering. So Shimon, the owner of the flock, needs to know that to safeguard his property. So therefore, again, even though when Reuven stole, Shimon had no idea about the theft. Shimon had no idea about the return. But because the sheep spent a little bit of time outside of the pen, it becomes a wanderer. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, Reuven has to tell Shimon Hababosai. By the way, what a tremendous and overwhelming Musar Haskell. See, Rabosai, we exist within the pen, right? Within the pen. The pen is called halacha. The pen is called community. It's a beautiful, magnificent, and holy pen. The problem is when you wander outside of the pen, I will say, I imbue myself with certain wandering-like behaviors. And we know this, we just know this from our own lives because we all veer outside of the pen, outside of the framework at some point in time. Once you veer outside of the pen, I will say, you break down certain normative behaviors, I break down certain levels of restraint, I break down certain gidarim. And I will say, can you rebuild your pen? Can you reacclimate your life to inside the framework? Absolutely. I will say, but once you become a strayer, I don't know if that's the right term, but you understand, once you become a wanderer, a strayer, and I've experienced life estranged from the pen, estranged from the framework, even for a small amount of time, it leaves its roshem on me. It leaves its mark. And I have to work on rehabilitating myself to once again living within the expectations of the framework. An incredible Musar Haskell. Let's go back there. Did Rav really say this? Barama be kale v'shadje v'lo yada I hadra ilo hadra omeis o nignav chay b'achri yusa. So it's an interesting case. Watch this. Right? I'm walking by and I will say, I see Reuven lifting up a sheep from inside Shimon's pen. And what do? I yell at him. I yell at him and he throws something down. But I don't know at the end of the day, did he return the stolen object? I return the stolen object. Or then that sheep dies or it's stolen. Ultimately, again, Reuven is going to be chayv and achrayis. My love, afagav the money. Is this not talking about a case where even though Shimon counted the flock, lo money? We're talking about a case where he didn't count the flock. All right, did Rav actually say this? Rav said, hechzir le'eder sheba midbar yatsa. If Reuven stole a sheep from Shimon and then he returned the sheep to a pen in the desert. All right, to a flock in the desert, Yatsa. Ultimately, again, Reuven is Yotzei. So we'll say so again. Rav Chanan bar Abba modirav berakuusa. Rav agrees about in the case of Rakausa. Rashi says over here in the case of a spotted sheep. In other words, they will say, here's what's interesting. When do you have an obligation to tell the owner of the sheep that you stole it, even if he's unaware of the theft? That's when the sheep is unrecognizable in the flock. But if the sheep is recognizable, that means the owner knows that it was stolen, and the owner knows that it wasn't there, even before counting time, and therefore the owner knows to watch over it. In that case, the thief would not have to go ahead and divulge the fact that that he stole to the owner. Rather, he could just simply return it. Incredible. So maybe this whole thing is a machlokes tanoim. So Shmuel says, if you steal a sheep from the flock, or you steal money from someone's wallet, from someone's money bag, you have to return the stolen object to the place where you stole it from. That's Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva says, Sarech das bal. And I'm both saying, according to Rabbi Shmuel just says your obligation is put it back where you took it from, but you do not have to tell the owner. Rabbi Akiva says, no, you need the knowledge of the owner. The owner has to know that you are returning the object. Shabbos says, so since you machlokes, Savrud decholi alma islay Rabbi Yitzchak. So we'll say we assume that everyone agrees with Rabbi Yitzchak. What Rabbi Yitzchak say? Rabbi Yitzchak, Adam asui lemashmish bekisa b'chol shah. So we'll say people with a money bag. Well, see, people have us do this with their pockets also, right? People are used to kind of like touching their money bag all the time, right? You want to make sure to feel that your wallet is there. The Gemara says, so because a person does that, so the Gemara says, my lav besela ladas. Are we not talking about a case, I will say, where Ruvain stole from Shimon a sela, and Shimon was aware of the theft? Or beplugta de Rabbi Shmuel, and therefore the machlokes ultimately again is machlokes Rabbi Shmuel, to which the Gemara says, betala shelo ladas uplugta de Rabbi Rabbi Yochanan. No, maybe we're talking about a case of stealing a sheep without the knowledge of the owner, and it's machlokes Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rav Zvid mishmei de Rava shomer. All right, so you want to say, you know what? We'll stop over for today. We'll pick up at Mirat Hashem. We are fine. We're doing, yeah. Oh, thank you. That was not as good as yesterday, but again, I know I didn't leave you in the middle of a story. I also have to tell you, I just have to, I got so Dr. Michael Klaff, some of you remember him, he used to daven here, learns with us now, Baruch Hashem online, and he sent me the most beautiful text. He said, I hope you heard my groan from my house as well. Mamish. So you see again, this was the groan heard around the community. I will say, good chat, we'll stop over here for today. Emirat Hashem will find, I'll announce the plans for the final Amid Emirat Hashem. Shkayach, I will say, incredible daf. All right, Chevron Zoom, Shkayach everyone. Great day, Jack.